Welcome to Within WordPress, your podcast about those wonderful people inside and outside that wonderful WordPress community. With us today is Marc Benzakein. Um, Welcome, Marc.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great to have you. So the name Marc Benzakein is, for a lot of people, a very familiar name. But depending on the history of how long they've been working with WordPress, it can have different connotations. So can you please share with us, how can they know you?
They most people probably know me if they know me. They're probably people who are veterans in the WordPress space. I was very active with my time at ServerPress, where we created a local development software and service called Desktop Server,
Yep.
and we did a lot of sponsoring and a lot of speaking at various WordCamps and Meetups, and that would be where most people would know me from past years. And then after shutting down ServerPress in 2022, I took a little bit of a respite from WordPress and then got back in. I started doing some work with Matt Capallo over at Site District, which is a small hosting company, and he kind of talked me back into the WordPress community. And then I reconnected with Dennis Dornan over at MainWP, and he said, "Hey, would really love to have you come join our team, helping us with marketing and things like that."
Mhm.
And so that's where people would know me from now. I kind of feel like there's, especially because of COVID, where there was this like break of personal events and things like that. I kind of feel like a there's a group of, like I said, veterans who know who I am, and then there's this break, and now we have a bunch of new people coming into WordPress who have absolutely no clue who I am. And so in a way, I'm kind of I feel like I have a personal brand that I've established in the WordPress community, and at the same time, I have no personal brand that I have
Yeah,
in the WordPress community. So it's this weird dichotomy, I think. But
I agree. I agree. I call it the
you know,
blip.
yeah, the blip.
I mean,
Yeah,
obviously
exactly.
the
That
Marvel
makes
Cinematic
sense. That's a
Universe,
good word.
the
Yeah,
Marvel Cinematic Universe helped us with that one because for
yeah.
what was it, for 4 years or 5 years or something like that? There were two different directions and then merged
Hmm.
back in again. It kind of feels like that to me, and nothing was really the same after the blip. So
Correct. Yeah,
I
yeah.
keep calling it the blip.
And I
But
feel like a lot of us who have been around for a long time have like this gut kind of motivation to like bring back the glory years the way it was. And yet
mm,
intellectually, we all know that can't be possible.
no,
And I think a lot of us are kind of going through this identity crisis of what do we do with this kind of situation. So
I think that's a very good point. I think that's so. You use the word veteran. I literally use that word in one of my bios, WordPress veteran, because
okay.
I
Uh-huh.
have been using it for 20 plus years.
Yeah, yeah.
This is 21 this week, as this week
Hmm.
we're recording this. So I feel comfortable using the word veteran.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
also know the negative thing about it, as in want to hold on to the past and stuff like that.
Right, right.
I try to move past it, but I recognize what you're saying is that there's so much changed regardless of the blip, but also the early days, the maturing days,
Hmm.
and where we are now. There's
Yeah.
stuff that happened that I'd love to see happen again.
Hmm.
Way more active community. Meetups and WordCamps is one of those. I mean,
Yes.
I don't know if you've seen central.wordcamp.org and seen the schedule. Uh,
I have it actually. It is as part of my Google Calendar, so I see,
okay, yeah, yeah,
when. Yeah,
same here.
yeah, yeah.
But I miss that. That's a fun part because I started going
Yeah.
to meetups, organizing them and going to them in 2000, end of 2007, 2008, I think.
Hmm.
From that, we organized the very first WordCamp Netherlands, and then et cetera, et cetera. WordCamp Europe is the
Hmm.
next big thing we focused on. And I kind of feel those were different days. But maybe I'm just
Well,
an old guy talking to another old guy.
well, it's very possible, but I've talked to a lot of the organizers, as I'm sure you have too,
Mhm.
from the big camps like WordCamp US and WordCamp Europe, and you'll get into these conversations if you're like me and you don't go to any of the sessions and you spend your time just talking to people
Yep.
at these WordCamps. And one, I think I want to say it was Sandy Edwards that I was talking to, who she was on the organizing team for WordCamp US.
Mhm.
And she was saying, the problem is that WordCamps are now so expensive because of all the extra labor that's required to deal with post-COVID, cleaning and preparation and all of these
Yep.
things that they didn't have to. For one thing, labor costs have gone up. I know,
Tremendously.
for instance, a good example is WordCamp Canada, which is their, premier
Mhm.
Canadian WordCamp. I think the price tag on that is, 150,000 or something like that. I mean, when I was organizing WordCamps, we had I think like a $15,000 budget
Yeah.
and
So
camps. And the WordCamps were the same size attendee wise as what something like WordCamp Canada is going to be.
you know what
And
the
that's,
will be there? How many? 100?
I think they're looking for 400 people or something like that for the initial one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
It's a good
like,
point.
and it's hard because you and I want to go. Personally, I actually like the smaller WordCamps because I remember them. I go
Yep.
to WordCamp Europe, and unless I took copious notes, I'll walk away from a WordCamp Europe or WordCamp US, and I'll say I had a great time, and they'll
Yeah.
say, "Really? What'd you do?" Talk to a bunch of people,
Yeah.
you know. So, so it's a different it's a different world, and it becomes very much more difficult to organize a WordCamp. And so that's why there's all this talk about next gen events and all these kinds of things. But I don't think anybody really knows, and I haven't been involved in that conversation. So I'm probably speaking completely out of ignorance here. So bear with me, which is not uncommon. Um, but um, there's I think these next gen events is like people are like, okay, we have to come up with another event. And it's like, okay, but what is that other event? What is that kind of event that we're gonna have? And I know for me, what I'm trying to do is in my local area of Fairfield, California, which is right near Napa and a little bit, it's near Napa. It's centrally located between Napa, San Francisco, and Sacramento. And we do have online meetups in that area. I worked in a co-working space where I have access to a classroom, and I'm like, I want to start doing in-person meetups.
Yep.
I want to start doing, so that's a start. But I don't know if we'll ever get back those glory years. And then there's, of course, WordCamp Central and how much money they're willing to put into these events as well.
Yep. Yep.
Because we used to get a huge amount of support. And then there's the sponsorship side, which
Yeah. Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
a spot,
Every single
you know,
aspect is different.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
no.
yeah. But I don't know if we can get those. I don't think we'll ever get back to that glory time. I actually am actively, I have actually accepted that.
I
But
I think
I do think, I do think about ways that we can take the best of what we had and somehow create some sort of a I don't know what the word is, kind of a mix of like the old with what we have available to us as the new. I just haven't come up with with the idea yet. I don't think.
I very much agree with your assessment. I hope for it to return, but I'm very doubtful that it does, because your example of Canada costing 150.
And don't, by the way, don't quote me on that
No,
number.
but even if it was 100 or 75, it's still
Yeah, right,
the
right,
work in
yeah.
Netherlands has roughly been the ballpark of 10% of that,
Mhm.
and we would have 400 to 500 people. The last two ones have been more expensive, sure. It's only natural,
Mhm.
but not to that degrrie.
Yeah, yeah,
It's kind of crazy how we got here.
yeah.
But yeah, I do hope that those next, what was it called again? Next generation type
Next gen. They
gens.
just call them. I think they called them next gen events or something like that.
So
Yeah.
I hope they catch on, but the evangelism that was possible in the early days, I don't expect them to come back in the way that they did. So
Well, and you have a lot more people, uh, in it. And I also feel like one of the other issues is we've got this, we already touched on a little bit. We've got the separation of the veterans
Mhm.
and the new blood, right? Another idea that I thought was we need to have some sort of mentorship kind of thing where
So that is
it's
actually
really
already there.
easy. I know that they're doing some things, but the way that I look at it is we work in an ecosystem. Excuse me. I apologize for this. Hopefully you can edit that out.
Or
We
maybe
work
not.
in an
Maybe good for
ecosystem.
you.
uh, we work in this system where most of us are introverts by our very nature. So when we go to these events, we gravitate to the people we know because that took a lot of work for us to go out of our comfort zone, meet new people, become friends with them. And so we go with what's familiar. So when we go to these events, we go to what's familiar. So then whether we like it or not, these cliques have formed, of these
Yeah.
veterans who hang out with each other. And then the new people come in, and I had this experience in Phoenix last year. New people come in and they're just like wide-eyed and they have no idea what's going on. And unless we actively like
Oh,
say, I need to get out of my comfort zone again, and I need to take on these young people that are just now exposed to WordPress and what it can be, I think that is one of the issues that we have with WordPress is that there's that separation and it's almost cliquish in a way that
I think that's a
that
good
I don't know
realization.
is healthy. So yeah.
I think that's a good realization because, and I see the same thing. The uh, like having to get out of your comfort zone, whether you are introvert, extrovert, whatever. I think all of
Mhm.
us have a comfort zone that we enjoy being in.
Right.
Forcing yourself to get out there,
Mhm.
to expose yourself to whatever happens at these events of whether that's knowledge or connection or any of uh, the other things that happen in between. That is something that needs to possibly be more on the forefront of our thoughts for those who have been longer going at these
Mhm.
camps for longer. That's probably a good idea, good realization to share with everybody who's listening right now. Like maybe next time you go, put in active energy into where do I see people looking for, like, what am
Yeah.
I doing here? New faces
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
If you see
open that
someone
door.
who looks lost, go introduce yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, go find a table at lunchtime where you
And
don't know a single person and sit down.
yeah, and don't be scared of people. I mean, I know
Yeah.
that I'm a 6'4" guy,
Mhm.
250, 260, so I'm aware of
Yeah.
what I'm saying here, but
Yeah. Yeah.
most of us are very approachable. Come talk
Yeah.
to us.
Right. Right. Yeah. But when we tell people that we're approachable, I think the issue is that we're putting the onus on them and they're already uncomfortable
Sure, sure.
because, you
Yeah.
know, and so we have to act. And I didn't mean to attack what you just said, of course, um, but it's up to us if we want to see this WordPress world still continue to thrive and grow.
Yeah.
It's up to us to do it at like this kind of grassroots level of like take on one or two people at a time and say, hey, I'm your guy. I'm your person that can help you navigate these waters because I've been doing it for a long time.
Well, you know what? I'm going to actively do this in 2 weeks' time in
And I'm
Clubhouse.
more than happy to.
Yeah. This sounds
Okay.
like a fun
Yeah.
experiment to do. Good idea. I like it.
Oh, good. All right.
And something else your relationship to WordPress, not just WordCamps and Meetups. You mentioned working for ServerPress, specifically
Mhm.
um, around the product of desktop server.
Correct.
And for those of you listening, I have no clue what that is. It used to be my favorite local development tool over MAMP Pro, for instance. Can you
Mhm.
share a little bit about what problem desktop server was solving and why that stopped
Sure.
being a actual solution? Because I think you meant explicitly going out of business.
Yeah, yeah. So there were a number of things that went into going to business out of business, which I'm happy to talk about as well. But the problem that we solved was, especially back in the early days of WordPress, the only real sensible, well, the only real practical way that you could build a website was you had to go on the server and you had to build the thing live, and you had to deal with this, what we called cowboy coding at the end. I think that
Yep.
it's a term that's kind of going away more and more because there are other options available than just local development. But and you'd build on the live site, and then you'd be live because you'd have this issue. You got to have a server, that can handle PHP and can handle MySQL and can handle and can handle you know various interpreters. I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden. I did this for years and now all of a sudden I'm drawing a blank. But you actually needed a server to actually do all these things. It wasn't just a matter of I remember the very, very old days. We didn't call a building local. We would just create a text file, write some HTML, open that file up in a browser, and boom, you'd have your web page. We didn't call a building
I'd have it
local.
open in my FTP client, which then would create a temp file. That temp file changed, and as soon as I saved, it automatically uploaded.
It automatically uploaded. Yeah. Those were the days, actually.
My Lord.
And yeah, it was the only thing you had to know how to do was look at the code and say, yeah, this makes sense, or this doesn't, or this looks good, or this doesn't. But you could actually, open it up on your local browser and see what it looked like before you send it up. And so I remember doing that with FTP too. I was all proud of myself for getting that all set up. But with WordPress and any CMS system, it becomes more difficult to do that because you have to have all these other components. And so what Desktop Server was it was an application that had all of that built in and basically had this wizard, and you just like click, 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 and you've got your site set up locally. It did not containerize the sites, which made it much faster. We could have like an unlimited number of sites. We could go to any of these sites and they'd all open just as quickly, depending on the horsepower of your machine, as opposed to other products that came out later that actually containerized your sites. And so if you got like 3 or 4 containers that were turned on, all of a sudden everything would slow down and all that stuff. The whole idea was you could build everything locally. You could build, break, and fix everything, make sure it worked. And then when you were done, you could send it up to your live server. And we had a deployment, built-in deployment capability that you just push a button and it deploys it up to the server. And to this day, it was really interesting. In the last couple of weeks, people have come to me and said, I really miss Desktop Server. It was the thing in the day, and I still love the way that it works. And it makes me think, I wonder if there's, viability. And I don't know that there is. And I don't have the bandwidth to like try anything. But Steve, who is the master of the code, actually, he might get back into tinkering with it someday. I don't know. He's really into right now, doing a lot of automation and things like that. So he works at a different level than I do, for sure. But it was really a great tool, and it was built specifically for WordPress. Yeah. So things like MAP and all these other local development tools, which are good tools, they would handle other CMSs, whereas Desktop Server was optimized for WordPress. It even says for WordPress professionals. It even said that as like the tagline when you
I remember
it up. Yeah. And so I am so grateful to have had the opportunity to work with that, because that was what got my foot in the door with this whole WordPress community, which I always, from the very first WordCamp that I went to, I recognized that the community was what was going to make WordPress strong. And this is in 2012, 2013. I haven't been in WordPress as long as you, but I still consider myself a veteran,
Oh, you are.
So,
sure.
And it was such an opportunity to meet so many fantastic people and realize how many good people there are in this community. And honestly, it probably one of the best experiences of my life, even though, we didn't necessarily end on a happy note because we ended up having to shutter.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that. Because I use the tool every single day for years, and then all of a sudden, no dice, no updates.
Yeah.
And
Well,
from somebody who's actually using it, and in my case, very extensively. So I used the deployments, I used all of that, and if I needed to have something fixed on the server because the deployment didn't work, I would have it fixed. And I was very actively in making this tool work for me, solve my problem. And then all of a sudden, it's bleeding out, it's dying, and then
yeah, yeah, yeah. So people have asked me many times, and I've had a lot of time to do postmortem on this, um and we sent out a release before we shut it down, and I feel like we handled the shutdown of ServerPress in the best possible way that you could, considering it's a kind of not a good situation,
yeah.
which was we told people, look, if you have a license, we're going to support you for the next year. So if,
Mhm.
we're going to support you for the period that, we aren't going to be doing updates, but we will support you. We will help you migrate to another local utility. We will do whatever we need to do in order to support you, because you are still valuable to us, even though the entity of ServerPress doesn't exist anymore. So that was one of our, when we sat and we talked about it, we spent literally a month talking about how are we going to shut this business down because we're letting a community of people down, and
Mhm.
we need to make that as easy as possible for them, because this isn't their fault, obviously. And so I feel like we handled that pretty well. But what happened with one of the things that made desktop server great, but also one of the I would say fatal flaws as far as the software goes, was at the time that it was developed, we had this piece in it. There's a part of the programming and that required something that only a programming language called Zojo could do. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, while our software was open source, unless you were a Zojo developer, there's not much you could do with it. Well, that was great for us in the beginning. People could take our code all that they wanted, but unless they knew how to program in Zojo, they weren't going to do anything with it. So that was, you know, it wasn't intentional. That was a byproduct. It was truly that Zojo could do something that PHP couldn't do at the time, JavaScript, all these things couldn't do at the time. And so the problem is Zojo developers are kind of rare. So
Deal with this
so
thing. Yeah.
yeah, so there was and by the way, expensive. So they're not just rare, but very expensive. So there was that piece of it. And because it was a compiled product, and there were things that came along from outside world like Microsoft and Apple. They started putting more security things in, and then you had to get everything signed and things like that. So going through the signing process took longer. And so anytime we wanted to push out an update, it was a whole new binary that we had to push out. And it took a lot of effort to push it out. Well, when you only have one key developer that can
It
do
becomes a
the
bottleneck.
Zojo piece, it
Yeah.
becomes a bottleneck. So then Steve says, okay, we're going to do everything PHP. Okay, we're going to just make everything PHP. And so the reality is, so before I get to that, backing up a little bit, what I discovered or what I thought about in retrospect is that we became a reactionary company rather than a progressive company.
Good point.
So
Yeah.
we started reacting to outside things. Oh, crap, Apple just put out a new update and their security sucks. So we have to put out a new binary. So whatever plans we had, we needed to make it so it would work with Apple. Otherwise, we'd have, a 5-page document on how to get around the new security settings that Apple had. Well,
Yeah.
then, of course, 2 weeks later, Microsoft would do the same thing because they have to keep up with Apple. And so then we'd have to, so we're constantly reacting. And this all started, and I don't remember the PHP version, although it should be ingrained in my head because this was like, pardon my language, this was my oh shit moment. I mean,
Mhm.
and not in a good way. It was WordCamp. I don't remember which WordCamp it was. I think it was WordCamp US at some point in time in Philadelphia. And it was
15, 16, I think.
yeah, and Matt comes up and says, we are going to recommend that everybody be on PHP 5 whatever. And one of the flaws with desktop server was you couldn't just easily switch out the PHP. And even though it was just a recommendation, the minute he said that, I said, people are not going to take that as a recommendation. People are going to take that as gospel. It's going to have to be that way. We
Yep.
need, and so I was like, I remember like in Slack or whatever we were using as messaging at the time, I remember sending a message out to the team because I was like at that, listening. And that was when I say it was my oh shit moment, I literally wrote, oh shit, in the thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
they were like, what? And I said, Matt just said this. And that was when we went from becoming a progressive company to that little bit of having to be a reactive company. Because then it was like outside forces are coming at us and we need to react to it. And we need to be faster and more efficient at putting things out. It almost took us a year before we could get that next release out that actually was PHP 5.6 or
I
5.5 or whatever
remember.
it was supposed to be.
Remember.
And
Could
so
you
anyway,
that
oh
a part of the issue at heart here is technical debt, something that's inside your code that is you're
yeah,
willfully accepting the limitations of it because it solves other problems for you, but it eventually
yeah,
runs out of being a
right.
small component and slowly turning into a damn.
Yeah, yeah,
Why?
yeah, yeah. And and honestly, that moment was when I really had, up until then, I was probably living in my little ideal world where everything is fine, everything is perfect. I don't care if anyone else comes along that, competes in our space because we've got supporters and people who love us and we put out a quality product, which by the way, even to this day, still works. You can still spin up a WordPress site with desktop server to this day, which is, so for a piece of software to have that kind of shelf life,
That's
it's
pretty wild.
it's it's pretty wild and pretty impressive. But we were losing market share. There's no doubt. And I would say it was because of the fact that we were not getting updates out fast enough. It wasn't because we weren't handling the support. It wasn't because of any other factor other than we were just getting our updates out too slowly because we were so busy reacting to things
Yeah.
and we weren't able, and so Steve started to develop desktop server 4, which had been in the, kind of in the in the can, and internally we were beta testing it for a while. And then we decided after that PHP thing, we decided, okay, we're just going to skip 4 and we're going to go to 5. And so Steve started working on 5. The shame of desktop server 5, it was going to actually have some really, really cool features. And don't ask me to talk about them because you're putting me on the spot and I can't remember exactly.
Come
I
on,
think
come on.
I think some of the features where we were going to be able to not only deploy, but we were going to be able to one click pull a site down. So you could one click pull a site down, one click deploy, and then we had like this phone book. So if you're an agency and you have different hosts for your different sites, because as you grow as an agency, sometimes
Yep.
some agencies just take over sites that are on other hosts. It would have like scripts specifically for that host for deployment so that you'd have no failures when it comes to deployment because the script was, and I was talking to web hosts and we were working through all of that and we were getting really, really close. But then we had that kind of fateful conversation where I think it was me that asked, but I'm not going to 100% take credit. One of us asked the question of, even if desktop server 5.0 came out tomorrow, would we recapture enough market share that we would be able to recover financially and make a good living? And it was a pin drop moment where we were just like, boy, it would take us way too long and I'm not sure it could ever happen. And so that was kind of like when we made the decision that like, and desktop server, we were internally beta testing it. It was solid. It was working. There was a whole bunch of stuff that was really cool about it. And
Well, in hindsight, do you still think it's the
uh,
wise decision? Because we now live in a world where we have I think probably as far as I am aware, local WP is still the largest
mhm. Yeah.
tool to set up local development sites for WordPress
Mhm.
specifically with extra features and stuff like that. We
Yeah.
now have Automatic's new studio, which is
Mhm.
a very clever way of using WordPress Playground.
Yeah. Yeah.
In hindsight, do you now say I'm still happy with the decision we made because we wouldn't have
I
been able to rival that,
yeah.
or do the
Um.
developments actually make you think, would we have?
So okay. So here's how I feel about that. I'm not happy we've had to make that we had to make that
No,
decision,
of course not.
but I do still think we made the right decision.
Okay.
And the reason for that is partly because we have so, like you said, we have so many more tools that kind of can be substitute even for local development. We
Hmm.
have staging environments where you're actually staging on the server environment that you're going to be pushing to. We have InstaWP, we have WordPress Playground, we have Studio, which I have not touched Studio, but when I was reading about it, I was like, okay, this is actually pretty cool, you
It is.
know.
The same.
Yeah. And so we have all these other things now where I'm like, the only real argument, there are only really a couple of arguments now for local development that were our big arguments, or so our big arguments for local development back in the day aren't really legitimate arguments anymore. The no cowboy coding thing. Well, if you've got a staging server where you can push and pull and you can have unlimited stages, and you can collaborate with people and you can show your clients without having to go through some, activation setup. You just say, here's the URL to the staging server. What do you think? It's hard to argue, for me. And maybe I'm just thinking about my personal workflow. It's hard, and you've got Git integration with all these hosts now, and you've got all these things with version control and whatnot, that it's harder and harder to say always use local development. I'm not saying that there aren't the cases where local development isn't necessary or isn't a good thing. I am saying that they are fewer. So as a result of that, we all know that people are going to take the easiest road
Yeah.
that they
That,
can. So even I, as a big advocate for local development with desktop server and everything, on my own stuff, I'd cowboy code all day long, because pulling the site down, pulling it into desktop server, doing my things, and then redeploying is a pain in the butt. If I can go in and I can make my quick change in 10 minutes as opposed to the half an hour to 45 minutes, and I'm really good at pulling down a site and redeploying. I mean, I've done thousands. So it's not, you know, so people in general are going to say, yeah, in my ideal world, I do local development, but the reality is that's a time sink, to have to go through that. And things like local now, I think you can pull down and push back up, but it's still only if you're on WP Engine or on
yeah,
Flywheel.
it's still
And
severely limited. I
yeah,
don't use those hosting companies,
yeah,
so
right.
that
Yeah,
functionality is lost on me,
right, right.
which I think in principle is the wrong thing to do. But
Yeah. No, I certainly think that if you're going to produce a local development piece of software, it has to be host agnostic, because the things that you would want to use it for have to be able to go to any host. And I know that back in the old days, Flywheel would say, we are going to become host agnostic. We are going to be, but honestly, I don't see from a business standpoint where you would throw the resources
I don't.
into making it that way,
I think,
So
from my perspective, it has always it had to have been um, something entirely agnostic to any hosting environment
right, right.
was going to win everybody.
Yeah, yeah,
Desktop server had that place.
yeah,
Obviously, that went south. But
yeah, yeah.
what I like about Studio, and and it's just the beginning. It's also very limited still. There's only we don't have MySQL in there yet, and a bunch of
Mm-hmm,
other
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But from my ideal perspective, so I do develop everything locally first, and then as
Mm-hmm,
soon as that when the feature is ready-ish,
mm-hmm,
I would like to have a fully Git integrated, fully staging connected solution where I essentially can say,
mm-hmm,
this is my feature branch, because I use
mm-hmm,
Git flow, not the GitHub pull request
mm-hmm,
stuff. I use
mm-hmm,
proper flow proper separation of features. I have my feature branch I have it ready, and I want to have that particular feature branch create a copy of production, turn it into my code combined with production on a staging site, and do that for your Git. Now, if we can do that, you have my dream solution. But you are very right. We are not there. And especially if I'm adding the, I want to be hosting agnostic, we are way not there.
Right.
So looking back, it's always easy to say, if desktop server had continued, I can see it having moved in this direction. Local WP, as much as I love it, and I love it, it's very nice to use. I'm very sad there's not much development happening on it. No new features.
Yeah.
That has probably a different reason, but it's connected to WP Engine, which means
it really is an onboarding tool. That's what it's a loss leader onboarding tool.
Yeah. So it's limited what my options are from an ideal scenario. And that's not even touching this new world of full site editing themes that we work with now that live differently in database and in file structure. And, there's the component of working locally, which is something I think you kind of alluded to, has become more complex, and thus a sinkhole in terms of the time you need to spend to get everything working correctly. Now, to me, a tool should and could solve all of those things, but it's hard. I don't see local WP moving in that direction. I really hope Studio will.
Yeah.
But before we're there, I think we're probably a year and a half.
I think
maybe.
I think if there's a market, like an honest market for a subscriber type thing where local development, it has to be all those things that you said. And I think that of all the companies that could do it, well, of course, Automatic could do it, but I do think that WP Engine and Flywheel could do it. And they could, and it wouldn't be impossible for them to go back to that idea of monetizing it, right? And actually charging for it if it did the things that they need it to do, that like you talked about, because an agency would pay for that.
Oh, for sure.
If they paid, if it was $100 or $200 a year, but they could do all the things from one interface, why, then I could see that happening. But
$25 a month would be perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
So many problems. You don't have to think about it. It's a click, set and forget. All done. What's not to love?
But once again, there's that component of host agnostic. So the only way that would be appealing to a company, to a hosting company, is if they're actually charging for the product itself.
Yeah. So either that or Studio becomes something that is pluggable, and then we add a plugin to it, which my plugin is for my environments, which I set in a config file, and I'm golden. I hope we end up in a situation where we see true innovation again, because right now Studio is a good example of something you wanna be able to do, but you're solving it with a rather complex tool, which is fine. Most developers are totally fine with using local WP or MAMP or the tools with the options. But we need to get to a place where we can easily hook into our new services like InstaWP, great example. You would like to be able to use them. Shouldn't be more difficult than connecting it to your local thing.
Right.
And done.
But, and this is another thing that I think that is actually, and I tend to be very frank, one of the things that I think could be discouraging to innovators is this idea that they will look at anything and they'll say, oh, Automatic's already doing that.
Possibly.
And so the disadvantage of Automatic coming in, while it bolsters Automatic's portfolio, obviously, is that it does kind of discourage and shut out a lot of these new innovators that are coming in and saying,
I'll give you that.
Yeah. So there's that to consider as well. And it's not to say that Automatic's the big bad guy here. I'm not trying to paint them in a bad light or anything. But it's just that's a reality. That is a practical reality.
Exactly. The same would go if WP Engine started local WP now. we would also say,
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, yeah, same
can we
thing.
not have
Yeah.
something agnostic, please? Or can we have something that
Yes.
I can
Yeah.
hook my own little functions in? That's relatively easy.
Right.
A
Right.
config file, JSON there, and we're done. You know
Yeah.
that. But no, that's a good point. That's a good point. So, but I want to change to a different topic.
Okay. Yeah.
Local development is obviously something you spend a lot of time with and played with and worked on as a product. You spend a lot of time on a different type of product, which is MainWP.
Correct. Yeah.
For those
Yeah.
that don't know what MainWP does, can you give us an overview?
MainWP, yeah, sure. MainWP is a centralized WordPress management dashboard. We are one of, I believe, two that are non-SaaS based. So our main focus is that community has the ability to develop extensions for MainWP. So the extensibility of MainWP is like unlimited. The other is our focus is upon privacy and security. So everything that we do, the first question that we ask is, how do we make this private and secure? As an example of how adamant we are about this, if you were to ask us for an accurate number of how many installs there are of our software out there, I couldn't tell you because we don't track even that. Okay. So the best we can do is we can look at the WordPress repo and we can see how many child themes are installed, or how many, not child themes, but how many the MainWP child is installed and how many of the dashboard is installed, and then kind of dividing the number of dashboard installs. But so we can do a little bit of math to come up with an estimate, but we are very like hyper focused on the privacy and security because it's non-SaaS. You own all your data. Okay. You can move it from one server to another. You can actually run the MainWP dashboard locally, which adds another kind of layer of security. So your dashboard is local, and all your child sites are, of course, on whatever host that you choose. And we like to think of ourselves as more than just like basic WordPress management, which when people think of WordPress management dashboards, they think in terms of, oh, so I can do all my updates from one centralized location. Yes, true. But also with the latest version that we've just released, and we're about to release another incremental update, we have included, we have the ability to have a cost tracker. So you can actually, if you're an agency, and let's say you have 100 different clients, you can cost track. Let's say you have an agency license for, a plugin, I don't know, Gravity Forms or something like that. Okay, you can put in how much you're paying for that license on Gravity Forms. You can put which sites are using the Gravity Forms, and then it gives you an actual cost breakdown of what you're paying to manage each site. That's just one feature. The other is a time tracker. So you can set up clients within MainWP and associate websites that you manage with these clients. And then you can time track when you're working on a project for that client on that particular site. You can time track, you just click a button, it starts it and stops it, and it automatically logs it. There are things that it does that you wouldn't necessarily think of when you think of like WordPress management dashboard capabilities.
Yeah, because I would say competitors to this particular suite of functions that you offer would be probably Managed WP, Dolly, I would say as well. Probably
Dolly, there's
Umbrella.
yeah. I'm not going to mention any other names. I
No,
just want to mention MainWP. I'll let you mention them, and I'll either agree or disagree with you. How's that?
That's perfectly fine.
I kid, of course. I kid, of course. They're actually all very good products too. They and what I tell people when they're like, I'm trying to decide on my management. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say some are actually some of them are actively developed on, like yours. Some are, I feel, fading in the background. But it's one of those essential tools any agency would have a place for to some degree, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once you get above, I used to say above 5 sites, but I think even above 3 sites, and one of the coolest extensions that we have, and it's free, as a browser extension. So it actually, like, if you open up Chrome or you open up Firefox, you actually have like this thing that shows you how many sites have updates that need to be made. And if you pin it to your
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
toolbar, you can actually see how many sites have updates. So you don't even have to have it in your routine to say, oh, I need to open up my dashboard every day and look at what's going on. You can just open up your Chrome browser and, oh, I've got 3 sites that need updates, or I need, or whatever, I better go and do that. And you can actually do the updates and the time tracking from that thing. So those are just some of the
Oh,
cool
that's
kind
really
of
neat.
innovative features.
That's
Yeah,
really well,
yeah.
you're answering already with that word, innovative. I was asking, like, I was going to ask, like, how difficult is it to find innovation in something that is relatively seen as something boring? And I have to do updates, I have to do maintenance, I have to do backups, and all of those things. Yeah,
We
not
have
the
a
most exciting thing, I would say,
Yeah,
in general.
yeah. So, um, I would say a lot of our innovation is well, first of all, Dennis, who's the founder of MainWP, he's really good at like cluing in on things that, but we have an incredible team. One of the things that that and I keep saying I'm going to do this like comparison between how having a successful major upgrade like we just did with 5.0 on MainWP, how you can do it successfully and how you can fail as we did with desktop server, what are the comparison and contrasting things? One of the things that we had in common, but MainWP has done it better, is pretty much everybody that's on the MainWP team, especially the core development team, they've been with MainWP since the beginning, or at least 5 or 6 years. And having that consistency, no turnover,
That's
and this
impressive in of itself.
we have these conversations, and Dennis is really good at saying, hey, I've got this idea, tell me if it's stupid. And we can actually say, Dennis, that's a really stupid idea. And it'll be like, okay, and he
But
moves on,
come
you
with
know,
another one.
or or he'll say, maybe I didn't present it well, let me try a different way. And so then, but we will talk it out. But he's perfectly, like, he's such a humble individual, which is an important uh
Yeah.
personality trait in a leader. But the other is that these people know the product better than anybody. And then we have like this really active community, which I would say helps us with innovation too, because they're more than happy to say, I really like this feature, but it would be really cool if it did this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so then all of a sudden we use Discord. We don't use Slack for our internal communications. All of a sudden this discussion in Discord is this possible? Can we do it? What's it going to take? Can we do it in the next release? Or is this something we need to punt down the line, but it's something that we want to do? And then we have this discussion, we put it on the production schedule, all these things. So innovation comes from so many places. It
Yeah.
comes from our competition. It comes from
Of course.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Of course. And so you'd think that coming up with innovative ways for what you deemed kind of a boring tool, which I guess if you're not,
No,
I
I
don't
didn't say
find
the
it boring
tool
at
was
all. I
boring.
think it's
I didn't say the tool was
yeah,
boring. The
oh,
principle of having to do maintenance, it's a boring tool.
yeah, okay, fair enough, fair enough. I think that the innovation is actually quite easy because we have so many sources for the ideas. We don't work in a vacuum. We put things out to our community. I write a weekly newsletter and I'm like, hey, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think? We put surveys up, and we're thinking about having a wide open Discord community. What do you think of this? Yes, no. Well, we got an overwhelming response that, yeah, a Discord community would be cool. So we are now working. We actually have actively a live Discord server that people can join and they can contact any of us. And Dennis is active in it. Dennis does not set himself as, oh, I'm this guy up here and I'm going to have 15 layers of gatekeepers before anyone can get at me, you know? So he's very interactive with if you go to the Facebook users group or the Facebook MainWP business page, you'll see that Dennis answers like half the questions. He's active, and so what I would say the greatest catalyst for innovation is being in contact with your community. And the minute you start losing that contact with your community, and the minute that you dehumanize what you're doing, I think that's when innovation slows down,
I think
because
that's
then
point.
you're doing it all yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. If you do not have a feedback loop, if you work inside your own bubble, um,
Hmm.
yeah, I can see that. Innovation in general is something that's so you still need people that see innovation. I know
Yeah.
some products that are great, but
Yeah.
nothing has been added to them for ages. Just simply
Right.
the
Right.
person who's in charge of it just doesn't see it. And I know
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
places even where they are in contact with the community, but it's apparently hard to move from idea to okay, but this is how it should work.
Well, and that was one of the issues that we had certainly with the desktop server.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. We were very much in contact with our community. We really, really valued the connection we had with our users. But going from, like I said, because we had like the uh, tech technological debt,
yeah,
that you were talking about, because we had that, overcoming that was too much of a hurdle. We don't have that particular hurdle in MainWP. And what else is cool is we do have people like Dennis is certainly a visionary as far as I'm concerned, but we have people within the MainWP like staff who see the vision and get it. So
that's
it's not just being the visionary, it's having the people that say, yeah, I get it. I get where we're going with this. And once again, a lot of that has to do with um the longevity that people have been there, how long people have been there and see everything. For me, I feel very fortunate. I get it because A, it's a workflow product. So, I have experience with that. I've known Dennis since 2013 or 2014
in internet
and
terms for ages.
for ages. I've known Dennis for ages, and we have very similar operating philosophies. And so it wasn't hard for me to step into the role and get it. I know what our demographic is. I know, I know ethically, I'm in alignment with Dennis. So it's really easy for me to say,
Yeah,
yeah, I know other marketers do this, but I'm not willing to do this, and Dennis is like, I don't want to do that either. So it's really, we're in sync on a lot of things. So it wasn't that hard for me to step in. There are still some things that I'm picking up on. I'm not saying I'm 100%, but there are a lot of things that I'm still picking up on. But overall, it's been really easy for me to step into this role.
that's nice, and that's a good example that you just gave to be ethically aligned to wanting to do the same job in the same way. I like this actual week with my co-founder Barry Coy. We're building Scanfully. One of the things that we
Yeah.
were discussing were some marketing techniques and funnels and things. And there's a few things that we go, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
we need to do this. There's a few things where we
Yeah.
go, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll feel
Yeah.
comfortable doing this.
Yeah.
Probably works, but like, where is the? And then we started fleshing out, and we're on the same page. So that's it's not a discussion, and that is
Yeah.
such a nice thing to have to be looking at the same perspective in the same way.
Yeah.
We have both
It's such a
understand,
huge deal.
yeah, because stuff needs to happen. There's no question about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But to understand each other
Yeah.
almost before you open your mouth, I think
Yeah.
that is one of the greatest gifts of being able to work with somebody who you are already on the same page about. In
Right.
our case, I had a vision for something to build. I found Buddy as my co-founder, and then to share the vision as much. He sees it as much as I do.
Hmm.
I mean, again, that's gold because what are the like? What is the
Yeah.
like? What are the chances of that? That's super
Yeah.
rare.
Yeah.
And then as we tackle all the problems we need to tackle, which are very similar, I guess, to any of the ventures that you worked at, um, to then continue to stay aligned without
Yeah.
having to put in a real effort.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what you said, that resonated with me in terms of how rare that is and how nice of
It
work,
is.
because
Yeah.
it doesn't
And
it
I
doesn't
consider
feel like
myself, I was gonna say, I consider myself fortunate that I found that twice in my professional career, you know?
I think you feel.
So, it's an unusual thing for sure, because I have worked with unethical people in the past,
Mhm.
and it's caused me a ridiculous amount of anxiety. It's caused me to put bandwidth and brain damage literally into fighting against something that I just could not sleep at night if we did. And saying to myself, not only do I have to fight with these people on these things as to whether or not it's ethical, but I'm also like fighting this thing of why should I even have to argue this when it is so obvious,
Yeah, it should be
kind of
obvious.
thing.
It should be obvious.
So
For some
yeah,
reason,
yeah,
you not interesting.
yeah, yeah.
No, that's that again, that is a very interesting thing to hear somebody say, particularly in the week that I experienced it very vividly myself.
Well, that's awesome, and congratulations on that. I think you're very fortunate to have found that.
Um, I'm very happy with my co-founder and the whole alignment. I would say the natural alignment that we have there. I'm very much aware how rare that is.
Yeah, yeah.
I have one last question for you, because before we started recording, you mentioned because my camera setup was let's
Mhm.
just say faulty.
Yeah.
You mentioned starting a podcast as well. Are you? Can you share something about that? Is it WordPress related?
Yes, it is not WordPress related.
Oh my!
It is completely not WordPress related, but I am more than happy to have people on it that are from WordPress. I consider myself very fortunate in many ways. One of the ways is by being part of the WordPress community. As an example, I have gotten to be exposed to uh, and become close with people of different generations.
Yeah,
I'm Gen X. Uh,
same.
and then I've got kids that are in Gen Z and whatever is after Gen Z, I don't know, but I've got kids like all over that. And I have these really incredible offline conversations with them where like they enlighten me on things, but in return, I get to like share my wisdom on things. And I feel like the conversations that we have as a society these days, there's this big separation, and there always kind of has been, especially in the States. I don't know about other countries, but in the States, there's this conversation where younger people don't want to listen to older people because older people won't give younger people the time of day
Mhm.
because they're too young and they're too ignorant. And I kind of feel like we're doing each other a disservice. I know that in a lot of cultures, the wisdom of the ancients meant something,
Yeah,
right? And of course, I consider myself the ancient in this
yeah.
particular. But at the same time, the younger generations bring these fresh new ideas, and we talk about innovation. They're the ones who are the innovators and are progressing, supposedly progressing things, if we would let them. And so my idea is to have is this thing. I actually registered the domain. It's called X versus Z podcast. Okay. So it's Gen X versus Gen Z, but it's really like multiple generations. Even my dad, who's part of I think they call it the forgotten generation. He's like, I'd like to be a part of that podcast. So, where we actually discuss uh issues of the day, but we do it in a respectful manner from our different perspectives. So the whole idea is and so what I've got is I've got a whole bunch of a list of a bunch of topics, and I actually put it on a spinner wheel. In the beginning of the podcast, I spin the wheel, and that's the topic we talk about. So it's completely unscripted, and
Right.
we have this very organic conversation from our different perspectives, and we respect these things.
Hmm.
And the idea is hopefully both sides of the conversation will take something away from it.
Yeah.
Now, I've done a couple of these that have really bad sound issues that I'm never going to air because I can't fix the sound issues. But I've done a couple of them with some people I'm very close to that are part of Actually, one is borderline millennial, the other is a Gen Z, and it was a lot of fun. And these two particular people were people that I had these conversations with regularly. And I said, I need to turn this into a podcast, because we just have like these organic conversations in the kitchen or wherever. And I'm like, we need to do this into a podcast. And so that's my idea is, with the resources that I have in the WordPress community and around, and the fact that I've got kids that are parts of these generations, I think it's time to start having like real respectful conversations about these things. And
I like it. I like
so
it.
that's the idea. That's it.
I
So
like it a lot. So I'm gonna
yeah.
just put it out there. If you ever need a Gen X European
Uh-huh.
view,
Absolutely. No, and that's the other thing. Yeah. Yeah.
if you'll have me, I'd love to be on. Sounds
Absolutely.
like fun.
No, I think that that's another aspect of it, which is the cultural thing.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, I grew up. My dad is a retired language professor, so I grew up in a world where if we weren't going out to other cultures, we had lots of other cultures in our home.
Yeah.
And so I was exposed to all these cultures, which may be why, I like to consider myself open-minded, but it may be why I find all this so fascinating, these other perspectives and things like that, and how other people live. But absolutely, European, any other culture, I would love to have, as part of these conversations. And I don't even have to be in this show. I might just like facilitate the thing, because my opinion gets old after a while. So other people, coming in, it may not be a bad idea. So I'm still working on format. I'm still working on a few things, but it is something that I am, and a website, but it is something that I'm becoming more and more passionate about. And I'm like, this could be really a lot of fun. And it is a total disconnect from WordPress, as a whole, you know, which is also kind of cool, because there is a world outside of WordPress.
Oh, there is very much,
Yeah,
very much.
yeah,
Having said
yeah.
that, this podcast is within WordPress, and I want to thank you for being on it.
Thank you. I really appreciate you letting me on. So it's been a lot of fun.
Happy